Hey, good Wednesday afternoon, everybody. I'm KHOU 11 meteorologist Tim Pandajis here with your tropical update on Hurricane Lee. No longer a major hurricane, falling below the Category 3 down to a Category 2. Shouldn't let down your guard, though. It's still going to be a very impactful, very strong system as it moves north and impacts the United States, the northeast part of the United States, and Atlantic Canada this weekend. Today is Wednesday, September the 13th, 2023. Here's a look at its satellite presentation on infrared. It's fallen down to 110 miles per hour. That's only a 5 mile per hour decrease from yesterday, taking it just out of Category 3 down to Category 2. It is a very large system. It is expanding in size as it gains latitude and gradually weakens and loses its tropical characteristics heading into the late week and early weekend. Very broad system here, and its wind field is also getting much bigger. Its visible satellite presentation here, still very impressive. Its latest wind field puts it out 100 miles, hurricane force winds, 75 miles per hour or greater, extending out 100 miles from the center. Tropical storm force winds now over 200 miles from the center. This is large already, but as it moves north and gains latitude, that wind field will likely expand. The overall peak winds will start to go down, but still hurricane force wind gusts can be expected over some land areas, especially Saturday morning into Saturday afternoon in coastal New England and eventually up into Nova Scotia and Atlantic Canada. Brand new track here from the National Hurricane Center as of 11 a.m. shows it as a Category 2 and gradually weakening as it speeds up and moves towards the north. Its slow movement has really been a unique characteristic of this storm for the past several days. Now still moving rather slow, but yesterday when we talked, it was at 6 miles per hour. Now it's at 9. That forward speed will get faster as it gains latitude and moves north. By tomorrow, 7 p.m., we're at 100 mile per hour winds, Category 2, then down to a Category 1. It should pass safely west of Bermuda by about 200 miles, the center of Lee. But with its wind field so large, tropical storm force winds are expected there, if not higher gusts than that, which is why a tropical storm warning is now in effect for Bermuda, and it continues to build north. And here we are by Saturday morning at 7 a.m., right around sunrise. Category 1 storm at this point with 80 mile per hour winds. The cone is offshore of Massachusetts and Cape Cod. But again, impacts felt way outside of that cone. We're talking about several hundred miles outside of that cone. And depending on exactly where in this cone the center of Lee goes, will determine how far west impacts are felt in terms of wind and rain going forward from here. And then eventually it weakens further, moves inland, likely over far eastern coastal areas of Maine or into Atlantic Canada. Let's talk about the wind field here. Pausing things by midnight Friday morning. Look at how large the wind field is. Here's Bermuda. For perspective, what you're looking at in terms of colors, all the blue shading here is tropical storm force winds, okay, 39 miles per hour or greater. Once you get into the green shades there, those are wind gusts potentially as high as 74 miles per hour or greater. Category 1 hurricane strength. You're starting to see some yellows in here and even some oranges. That would be up to Category 2, if not close to Category 3 wind gusts in some of these areas here, closer to the center of Lee. Notice here's Bermuda by Friday at midnight, and we've got tropical storm force winds almost hurricane force wind gusts moving up over the island there. It moves north. The wind field gets even larger now. Here we are Friday night at 7:30. Sun's going down. Tropical storm force winds already making their way up to Martha's Vineyard, Nantucket, and Cape Cod. We go farther out in time. Look at some of these projected wind gusts here from our high-res model here going out to about Saturday morning at 8 a.m., showing Category 1 wind gusts potentially here up through Cape Cod, up into Nantucket, Martha's Vineyard, tropical storm force wind gusts in places like Portland, Maine, over to Boston, and even Providence, and the far eastern portions of Long Island could still see wind gusts in excess of tropical storm force by early Saturday morning. And of course, this all moves head-on into Atlantic Canada later in the day here. Now, its exact track is still not set in stone. We still do have some disagreement in models, although the consensus has narrowed here over the last couple days. If you've been watching these videos, a couple days ago, this spread here was over 700 miles. Now it's below 400 miles. Still significant, and the exact track at the time of when it's here is going to be really determinant on what impacts are seen in New England, but right now it looks likely of significant impacts into coastal New England and up into Atlantic Canada. So in terms of what you should do to prepare, start making those storm preps now in coastal areas of Maine, Massachusetts, and even into portions of Long Island. Monitor the forecast farther inland off to the west, because if this storm jogs 50 miles west, impacts here will be much greater wind gust speeds potentially. Let's talk impacts, rainfall and flooding. This will be a fast-moving storm by the time it approaches and passes well east of Cape Cod. 2 to 5 inches generally overall in areas that are already saturated and have already seen flooding issues this past week. We're talking about Massachusetts here. That could be very, very bad news for them. But as it moves into Atlantic Canada and speeds up even more, the rainfall should not be that much of an issue there. 2 to 5 inches is manageable in a lot of areas. Wind speeds, that will be the biggest thing. Hurricane force wind gusts in coastal areas, Cape Cod, Nantucket, Martha's Vineyard, in excess of 75 miles per hour. Now, coastal floodings, the areas that are seeing the onshore winds persisting, piling up that water in low-lying areas, meaning that moderate to high risk for coastal flooding and erosion there. Power outages, we've still got a lot of leaves on the trees there. When you get hurricane force wind gusts, that's enough certainly to take down some trees and cause some power outages, so that could be moderate to even high in some areas there. Let's look at the two models in terms of wind gust speed forecasts here. This is going to be the European model, stopping things at lunchtime on Saturday, still putting out excess of Category 1 wind speeds here, wind gusts, 75 at Nantucket, 80 miles per hour in the northern tip of Cape Cod, well over tropical storm force in places like Boston, Portland, and down even into Providence, over 50 mile per hour wind gusts potentially here. That center moves up into far eastern portions of coastal Maine, just to the west of Nova Scotia, bringing wind gusts there in excess of 60 miles per hour, and then as it moves inland, that wind will start to diminish. GFS, on the other hand, a little bit weaker, slightly, still bringing up over 70 mile per hour wind gusts as we get into Saturday morning in places like Nantucket, Cape Cod, and over into Martha's Vineyard, still bringing well in excess of tropical storm force winds in Boston and Portland. Now, I want to give you a closer up look here of how things look in coastal Massachusetts and over into Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard as well through the same time frame, going through Saturday morning, stopping things around lunchtime. Look at some of these wind gusts. Onshore, we've got a strong northerly wind, so stronger wind gusts here, less friction with those winds coming directly in off the water, and that could pile up the water here. So north-facing beaches here on Cape Cod by Saturday lunchtime will likely be seeing significant flooding and storm surge threats here. Then as the storm begins to pull a little bit farther to the northeast, we see that wind direction shifting over Cape Cod Bay, now coming in due west. So west-facing beaches here as you get in the northern part of Cape Cod will likely be seeing the storm surge risk and coastal erosion. That area still a breezy afternoon and evening for most of those areas, with that large wind field taking some time to slow down. Again, here's a look at the high-res computer models in terms of the National Hurricane Center track here. Notice as we stop things by early Saturday morning, the center of this model painting Lee right in the center of that median line of the National Hurricane Center track there. So falling in line, but notice the outer bands, heavy rain and very strong winds moving up and over coastal Massachusetts and eventually up into Maine as well, and coastal or Atlantic Canada. Rainfall totals, as we talked about, 2 to 5 inches. It's a fast-moving system, so it won't have a ton of time to drop a lot of rain. Lee's out there, Category 2, Margot, Category 1, and then we've got a 90% odds of this wave here developing and becoming our next named storm, which would be Nigel, in the next 24 to 48 hours potentially. Quick look at Margot here, 90 mile per hour winds, but not affecting anybody in the middle of the Atlantic. And then we've got Invest 97L. That's what this wave has been tagged as, just an area to keep track of. And the spaghetti plots here take this on a westward track first and then a northwest track, eventually recurving potentially out to sea before it even makes it towards Bermuda, so it'll be even east of there. We'll monitor that, though, as we go farther out in time. That's the latest on your tropical update here on this Wednesday. Keep in touch on social media, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. I'll see you again tomorrow.